this is Mrs. K. You're watching Mrs. K's Healthy Eating Channel, and we're here to help you to eat well and get cooking. Hi everyone, welcome back to Mrs. K's Healthy Eating Channel. Right, well, if you look on the Eat Well guide that's going to pop up on your screen, you can see that we're now almost completed our Eat Well guide. So we've looked at the fruit and vegetables in the green section where we get our vitamins and minerals. We've looked at the carbohydrate section where we've looked at the things that give us energy as well as fiber. We've looked at the fats and oils where we made carrot muffins with our oil instead of butter, so that we're looking at eating more unsaturated fats rather than saturated fats. So remember, unsaturated, liquid oil, saturated, the solid fats. Then we looked at the next bit, which was the blue part, dairy. That's what we did last session. And dairy is what gives us calcium. And we looked at partnering with the sunshine vitamin, vitamin D, and how important it is for your skeleton, for our bones. Very important all our lives. We need dairy all our lives. Or dairy alternatives, which was the alternative soya milks, the almond milks, and there are lots of dairy alternatives rather than just having milk. Okay, so today what we're looking at is the last section, which is protein. And that's the pink section on your Eat Well guide. And we're going to look at why we need protein, where does it come from, and are there different types of protein? And I think you're going to be surprised at what we're going to learn today. So let's get started on our protein. So first of all, why do we need protein? Well, without protein, we don't grow. We need to have protein to get to our maximum height. So protein, as well as we learned last week with our skeleton growing, with our dairy and our bones growing strong. So children who don't have enough protein up to their sort of peak age of about 18, who don't have enough protein in their diets, will not reach their maximum size. Okay, so we are very lucky in the West, in this country, where we have plenty of protein, so most people are able to access enough protein to grow to their full height. Why else do we need protein? Well, if you look at just your hair grows. Your nails grow. You cut them and they just grow again. That's all done through protein. When you cut yourselves and there's a healing and your skin heals again, that's protein that does that. When you eat your food, there are enzymes in your stomach that break down the food. All that is protein. Protein does all sorts of things in your body that you probably weren't even aware of. And that is why we need protein every single day, because it's not stored as protein ever. And we also actually need protein at least twice in a day, if not 3 times, because proteins are used up so quickly, and because there's so many functions of protein in the body that the body keeps needing replenishing and keeps needing having more protein, so that the protein is there for the jobs to do during the day, which is our growing of our hair and digesting our food and all those sorts of things. Okay, so the other thing that I don't think people are aware of is when we eat protein and we eat too much protein, that protein is converted into glucose. And as we know, glucose is what gives us energy, because when we looked at the carbohydrates, all carbohydrates are broken down into units of glucose. And that glucose is stored in our muscles and used for energy. Well, the same thing happens to protein. When we eat too much protein, that protein is broken down into glucose, and goes and works along, so it joins up with the carbohydrate, glucose, and our body uses that for energy. Now that has a knock-on effect, if you think about it. If you're eating just the right amount of carbohydrate, but then you eat too much protein, you're going to have more glucose, more energy than your body is using up. So you could actually end up putting on weight, and the way that happens is that whenever glucose is used up and there's some left over, that gets stored as fat. So we've got carbohydrate is glucose, and if there's too much glucose in your body, it gets converted into fat and stored under your skin for when you need it another time. Right, so let's now look at why we should, well, first of all, what are proteins made of? How do we get them? Okay, so I've got some beads here which I find really easy to understand. So, here is, I've made a necklace out of beads, okay? This is what proteins look like when you eat them in whatever you're eating. Okay, and actually they're not straight like this. They're all curled up in a tight little ball like that. They're all curled up. And on this string you will find lots and lots of different types of proteins. And actually they're called, each little bead, imagine that proteins are little beads. Each little bead is called an amino acid. Now this is quite complicated. If you're not sure about it, in my next series I will go into more detail about this. But for today we're going to say that all the little proteins are called amino acids. Everyone is different. And these amino acids, there are about 20. So there are 20 amino acids, and they all join up, all in different variations. So I've got a big packet of beads here, and just like when you make necklaces, you choose different beads. So I've got lots to choose from. I might have a couple of greens, a couple of turquoise, I've got yellows, 2 yellows that are the same. So they're all randomly made up with all these 20 mixed up. Or certainly not maybe all 20, but some of them, up to 20. So there could be a combination of up to 20 kinds of beads. And because there are so many different kinds of functions that proteins do in your body, they're all needed for different things. Okay, so when we eat, say, a piece of meat, we're going to eat lots of these little necklaces joined up like that. Okay, and our body, then we cook them. And actually, when we cook proteins, that's what raw protein looks like. So we'd never eat a raw egg, would we? We'd cook it. And when we cook the egg, actually, these stretch out. And that's, then the body can break these down more easily. Okay, now, there's one problem. And that is that there are 9, well, actually 8, but 9 up to, for a child. But for an adult, there are 8 of these beads that the body cannot make, cannot change. Okay, the body can actually take all 11 and actually create them with bits and pieces. The body is like a little factory. It's quite amazing how it can make some of these, put these little proteins together. But there are 9 for children and 8 for adults that the body cannot make, cannot process it. It doesn't have the ability to do that. And we have to make sure we eat these. Because without these 8, or 9 as children, we're not going to have the right proteins for growing our hair, our nails, our bodies, and so on. We have to, and these, we have to eat these. And these, that's why these are called essential amino acids. So we've got 20 altogether. 11 the body can kind of cobble together and make and process. But 8 or 9, if you're a child, cannot be made in the body. And we can only get these in the kinds of food that we eat. So let's look at where do we get these from, these special, essential amino acids. We get them from protein foods. Now, there are 2 sources of protein foods. There are protein foods from animals, and there are protein foods from plants. And we're going to have a look at these more closely. So, I hope you're all with me now. So, we're looking at the kinds of foods that we have to eat to get these 8 or 9 essential amino acids. Let's look at animal products. So, what does that include? Any food from an animal has got all 8 or 9 essential amino acids. So let's look at things from an animal. We've got yogurt. There's a tin of tuna, fish. I've got some other fish here. I've got some fish fillets. Chicken. It's just come out of my freezer, so it's still frozen. Cheese. I've got another block of cheese here, cheddar cheese. Philadelphia cream cheese, milk, meat, beef, lamb, pork, all meat, all red meat. Got some bacon here, bacon, and eggs. Let me just go and I'll get you some. I've got some fresh eggs from my hens. Eggs are lovely sources of protein. So here we are. All these things are from an animal somehow. So everything from an animal that you can think of, or a fish or poultry, all have these 9 or 8 essential amino acids. Right. And you need to eat these. And what did I say at the beginning? We actually need to eat them at a minimum of twice a day, because proteins are used by the body so much and so often. So we need to replace the proteins every time. Okay, so we could perhaps have, if you think about it, you're probably already having protein at least twice a day, if not 3 times a day. In your breakfast, you've got your milk, probably. You may have cheese in the mornings, you may have yogurt. Lunchtimes, you're probably having maybe some cheese, some ham, maybe some meat. Maybe you're a vegetarian and you're having lentils, or you're having chickpeas or whatever. You're going to be eating proteins, and then probably at dinner time as well. So you're probably all doing really well at the moment. Most people eat enough protein. Okay, so that's your animal sources. And we call this group HBV. Now, let me tell you what that stands for. I'm sure you can all guess what H means. H for high. That stands for high, biological, B for biological, V for value. High biological value. And that's because it contains all those essential amino acids. The one thing I will say is each of these things they do not contain the same amount of amino acids. So don't forget, some foods will have more of these than others. So if you're eating a piece of chicken or beef, for example, you're going to get lots of these. If you're eating an egg, you're going to get all of them, but fewer. And in fact, if you only ate eggs, you would have to eat 6 eggs to get enough for the whole day. So if you are eating, 1 egg is 1/6 of what you need in a day. Okay, you'll find that the meat and the fish and the chicken have lots of these. Milk has less, yogurt has less, so does cream cheese and cheese. They have less of these, but they still have them. Okay, so it just means you need to, if you're not eating meat, fish and chicken and you're only eating eggs, yogurt, milk and cheese, you'd have to have more of it than if you're eating a piece of steak where you would, or a piece of some beef mince where you'd only have to have one portion and you'd get enough for the whole day. Okay, right, so that's this group, HBV. Now, as I said, not everyone eats meat, and that's not the only place we get protein. There are a lot of people who are vegetarians or vegans, and they need to still get all their proteins. So they eat things like chickpeas, beans, I've got a tin of lentils, kidney beans, peanut butter, but this peanut butter is really the peanut butter that's got no sugar added. Then we've got peas. I've got a little tin here of mushy peas, but actually peas, good old frozen peas, have got protein. So have fresh beans or beans. Any bean family, anything that's a bean has got protein. And I've got some red lentils, which are lovely to put into soups or curries or stews. Nuts, lovely nuts. We love nuts. Now, some people are allergic to nuts, and in that case, you will not be having nuts to eat or put into any of your food. But nuts are a very good source of protein. They're actually very high in protein. But, I'll tell you in a sec. Rice, even rice has got not a lot of protein, but some protein. So less than all of these. Okay, but there is still some protein in rice. There is also some protein in wheat. And actually, when I tell you what the protein in wheat is called, you will recognize that word. The protein in wheat is called gluten. And that's what some people are allergic to. Now, so flour or wheat products have got a little bit of gluten, a little bit of protein, just like rice. And so we've got a little bit of protein in bread, a little bit of protein in pasta, and in anything that's made from flour. Okay, so there's quite a lot of things, that plant things that have protein. The most important one is soya. Anything that's made from soya or uses soya has protein, as well as quinoa. It's spelt quinoa, but quinoa has a good source of protein, and I'm going to tell you about soya and quinoa. And the other one is the man-made protein that we've come up with called corn. Okay, Q-U-O-R-N, corn. All the corn products have a good source of protein. Now, the problem with this group here, is they do not have all of the necessary essential amino acids. They don't have all 8 or 9 amino acids. So you may find that chickpeas have, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You may find that nuts have 2, 4, 5, 6. You may find that kidney beans have 3. Or lentils may have 4. Okay, so that's a problem now, because we have to eat all 8 or 9 of these. So what do vegetarians do? I'll tell you what they do. First of all, it just so happens that soya is an exception. Soya is a plant, but it actually is an HBV. And that is why in Asia, there are so many people who are vegetarians, and they have always eaten soya. And from soya, we get soya cheese, which is called tofu, and lots of different soya products. And they fit in under HBV. In other words, soya has got all these 9. So soya is an exception. And there are 2 other exceptions. One is quinoa. Quinoa has all these. Now, actually, quinoa was a staple diet of the people who lived in South America. And they didn't have a lot of animal proteins many hundreds of years ago. It was the colonists who introduced pigs, cows, sheep, and so on to South America. And they got their protein principally from quinoa. So a good source of all of your proteins. So that's another exception. And the last exception is the man-made protein, which is corn. And of course, corn has been created from a mushroom plant and has been created. It was actually originally created because the people who created it thought that we were going to run out of meat and that people needed good protein, so they created corn. And it has become now a very common and popular product, and most vegetarians will be eating corn. Okay, so we have got 3 exceptions on our plant section, but the rest of them, unfortunately, don't have all 9. So this group are now called, and you can see, I'm sure you've already guessed it, L standing for low biological value. So we've got 2 groups, the low group and the high group. This group plus 3 exceptions, soya, quinoa and corn are HBV, and we've got the plant, the rest of the plant kingdom, which is LBV. Okay, now what can a vegetarian do to make sure that they are eating enough of these? Well, what we call it is mixing together these different proteins. Now, no one knows, well, you can know if you're a scientist, but none of us would know if we were eating a tin of beans or a tin of kidney beans, how many of these we were getting. So the thing is to mix them, to make sure that you're eating, when you're making a vegetarian casserole, that you put kidney beans as well as chickpeas, say, and some lentils. So you're putting these 3 together, and hopefully, with the 3 mixed up, hopefully you will have all 8 or 9 amino acids. And we call that protein complementation. It's a big word, don't worry about it if you can't remember that. Just the most important thing to remember is that we need to mix our proteins, our plant proteins, if we're going to have enough protein. Okay, generally, these products do not have as many of these as your chicken, fish, meat. They have a very high percentage of these amino acids. These have slightly less generally, so we have to make sure we eat enough of them. Okay, so I hope that's not too complicated for you. So now we've learnt that we need proteins to grow. We need proteins for our everyday functions to work. So our nails, our hair, our digestive system, healing. In fact, when anyone's had an operation, they should be on a high protein diet because proteins speed up recovery from an operation or a bad illness. And that is why you'll often hear people say, oh, in the old days, we used to make broth, beef broth. Get some bones from your butcher and make a soup with some meat bones, because that broth is giving the person extra protein to help them to get over their sickness more quickly. So proteins are essential in our diets. Without them, we cannot function properly. Something will go wrong. Okay. Then we've also learned that we need to eat them twice a day. We've also learned where we get all our essential proteins from this group, and we can get them from this group as long as we mix and match However, if we're eating soya or quinoa or corn, we will be getting enough of our proteins. Now, the last thing to remember, to look at, is how much do we need a day? Now, actually, it's quite amazing how little protein we actually need. If I take my scale, right, if we're looking at 40 to 60 grams, now usually males and teenage boys need more protein than girls, and that's because they are taller and they have more muscles. So they would have normally more like the 60 grams, and girls and women more 40 to 45 grams, unless you're an athlete. If you're an athlete, you could double that easily for your needs. Okay. Now, this pack of mince is 500 grams. 500 grams. You actually only need, I get a pair of scissors and I cut this open. You need, what did we say? 40 to 60 grams? Do you see, or immediately, that you are probably eating way more protein than you actually need? So, now the reason you don't need a lot of this meat is because there's a lot of these amino acids in here. This is packed full. So you're probably only going to need that much. But don't forget, what we should be doing is adding this meat to a sauce, for example, and having it with our dinner, with vegetables, with our carbohydrates. So, yes, we're probably in the bracket of having too much protein and it's converted into carbohydrate. So remember that when you eat your protein. Right, I think that's where we're going to end today. If you're interested in learning more about proteins and more about any of the things we've discussed on the Eat Well guide, in my next series, we're going to look more in depth at these things to help you understand how your body works. Right, we're going to now get ourselves ready for our practical, where we're going to make something with our mince, and we're going to make something tasty and healthy. So I will see you. We're going to clear up, wash hands, clean down surfaces, and get everything ready. I'll see you in a bit.